Welcome to See You on the Internet, a podcast exploring life, love, and the pursuit of happiness in the age of the internet. We're your hosts.
I'm Kate.
And I'm Nicole.
Let's get into it. This is a day that we're kind of made for this episode, Nicole.
Well, we were made for it, and we made it happen, ultimately.
So true. I think no better place to start than ask me what I saw on the internet this week.
Kate, what did you see on the internet this week?
This week, I was just perusing the internet and saw an Instagram post that was kind of in defense of fairy smut and how it relates to ancient mythology and fairy tales. And I said, yeah, I need to know everything about this. I need to know everything about this. And we turned that into reality.
We did. And that's something
we do kind of know everything about it now.
We are always turning our dreams into a reality.
Absolutely.
Sort of our own version of a fairy tale, you could say.
You could say that. For sure. Which of us is the shadow daddy? You can decide. Everyone can decide.
Yeah, who gives more shadow daddy energy, me or Kate? Vote in the comments, like and subscribe. I'm just really excited about today because I feel like have learned so much about the origin of fairy tales and kind of their evolution and to this quote unquote genre of fairy smut these days. And the general theme is fairy tales aren't just bedtime stories. They're radical, rebellious, and sometimes, most of the time, really horny. So we have a lot of really fun information to talk about today. This is like less of Kate and I being really chaotic and more like teaching you guys what we learned and something that we think is really interesting and kind of discussing along the way. So
yeah, it's going to be really fun.
You literally did note cards.
No, I have at least 50 index cards.
I'm obsessed with that.
I took all of the research that was done for this episode and I wrote it on flashcards and I have it organized in the way that we want to talk about things today.
Perfect.
I've got everything right at my fingertips.
I love that for you.
I don't think I've written.
You love note-taking, though.
I do love note-taking.
Perfect for you. You love a class. You love taking notes.
I know. No, this was perfect for me, except I literally realized I'm out of practice, man. I haven't written that much in so long. My hand was cramping. My arm was cramping. I was like, why am I feeling this in my triceps? Like 100%. It was giving Severance. You don't know this yet, Nicole, but you'll get it. The girlsies that know the girls that get it. It was giving Severance, me writing this for so long that my hand was cramping. But we had so much fun. We're gonna kind of kick it off in a minute, but before we do that, I want to preface this episode. You know that Nicole and I never are trying to be factual. We are never promising facts, except for today. Today is different, and while we will be kind of riffing, as you will, we'll be citing a lot of different stats and studies and quotes and everything. So I'm going to run down a quick list of people that we are citing in this episode. So if you hear us say something and we don't attribute it to someone like in the moment, just know that these are the people whose words and brains and thoughts and research we are using. So first we have 316's Jack Zipes and the many subversions of the fairy tale. So Jack Zipes, keep that name on your head because he's kind of all over this. He could probably be credited as like an additional host of this episode. We also, the one that started it all, National Geographic, their article, Fairy Smut is having a moment. A moment it is. Many moments. It's been one long moment, you might say, after this episode.
Apparently, allegedly.
We also have from the New York Times, why romantasy readers pine for 500-year-old shadow daddies. We're going to get into that. Pop Sugars, meet the shadow daddies of romantasy. Bustles, inside the wild, wonderful world of fairy porn. And Wikipedia. Don't judge us, but there is definitely Wikipedia in here.
A lot of Wikipedia.
I love a Wikipedia. I live on Wikipedia. So
You know what, though? Moment
what?
for Wikipedia, okay? Let Wikipedia have its shine because actually, we went from you're not allowed to cite Wikipedia because it is not allegedly vetted by anyone to Wikipedia is quite literally the only valuable source these days because big government does not have its grubby little hands on that propaganda. Okay? So
Amen.
in
Amen.
Wikipedia, we trust. They try. They're trying to take it down. They're trying to take it from us, but we
We
will
won't
not
let them. So, guys, like we said, today we are talking about the history of fairy smut. So, to understand the rise of spicy books like ACOTAR and all the books that you know that Nicole and I love, we are diving really deep into the history of fairy tales, which is kind of where it all began.
hmm Like Kate said, it's a little unhinged, and we're talking a lot about Jack Zipes and his thought process around fairy tales, 17th century salon gossip, and your favorite shadow daddies.
Fairy tales have always had horny undercurrents. They always have. And they go way back to medieval times.
We're talking rebellious French aristocrats, dark origins of the Fae, and why Little Red Riding Hood is actually about gendered violence.
And of course, romantasy, because what is a modern fairy tale without wingspan discourse and morally gray love interests?
It's history or herstory. It's horny and it's deeply magical. Welcome to our enchanted, slightly deranged book club.
Let's get into it. Getting my trusty
Get those note cards
note
out.
cards. So, you heard us say Jack Zipes. I said keep his name on the brain. Keep that name on the tip of your tongue.
Not like Will Smith. Do not keep his name out of your mouth, okay?
Nope.
Keep it in
Keep
your mouth.
his name in your mouth and on your brain. So Jack Zipes is a preeminent fairy tale scholar. This man lives and dies for fairy tales. He loves them. So he has written and edited and transcribed dozens of books. So, and just a couple of them is the original folk and fairy tales of the Brothers Grimm, the OGs, Brothers Grimm, OGs,
Mhm.
and the complete fairy tales of Oscar Wilde, which actually, fun fact, I did not know that Oscar Wilde was like writing fairy tales.
Me either.
I actually, no, I'm not going to say it. Anyways, next.
Keep that thought inside.
We're not going to go there. This is about us being smart today. So I want to start off, we're going to start off with a section titled Fairy Tales as Radical Tools. Let's start off with a quick quote, shall we? Magic isn't fluff. It's transformation. Scientific, emotional, political. Fairy tales are blueprints for change. So let's talk about that.
Let's get into
Let's
it.
talk about it. Fairy tales aren't just for kids. In fact, if you have ever read what the
The
original,
Brothers
like,
Grimm.
the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, that's not for kids. That is
That's
not
just
for
fucked up.
kids. That is kind of equivalent to seeing Wicked on Broadway and then reading the book.
100%.
No.
100%.
The Brothers Grimm, like, fairy tales are not just for kids. So they are weapons of revelation. Jack Zipes argues that they expose the cracks in our social systems, not just offer fantasy escapes. So we're going to talk a little bit about how fairy tales kind of started and what kind of talking about magic brings, because I think, in our day and age now, when we think about fairy tales, when we think about magic, we think, Peter Pan and the Little Mermaid, and we're talking like, Tinkerbell is like the fairy that comes to mind, and it never really started that way. Zipes defines magic as transformation, scientific, emotional, societal. It's how we change ourselves and the world. Fairy tales are manuals for this kind of transformation, disguised as fantasy.
I just find it so interesting because, like, I don't know about you, but I think a lot of people have always been like, "Oh, I wish I lived in Harry Potter. Like, I wish I had magic. Like, what would my life be like if we actually had magic
Mm-hmm.
in this world?" And I beg to differ. I do think that we have magic in this world. We are just so used to it that we don't consider it to be magic. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were an extraterrestrial and you came to this planet and you saw the things that we were able to do and the things that happened on this planet, you would be like, this place is magical.
Yeah,
And I think all of the magic that basically stems from these fairy tales are an extrapolated way and version of us thinking about how things are happening within our world and then making them happen just a little bit easier.
totally.
So I love the way that he is thinking about fairy tales
Mm-hmm.
because that's also one of the reasons why I love the fantasy genre,
Yes.
because I love these epic journeys of transformation and character arcs that come from them.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we're going to talk a lot about this, but fairy tales and fantasy is a way for people to kind of describe and think through changes that they want to see in their world. So
Mhm.
it started a lot. Actually, it started, its roots are in feminism. Like
Mhm.
it is, that's like literally where fairy tales started. Women started fairy tales, and they started in Parisian salons. And
Mhm.
when you think of the word salon, it's not a hair salon. They were not just like ladies who lunch and go get their hair cut. No, salons were gatherings of women in the 17th century. And it's at a time that women were not allowed to have education. They were banned from schools, they were banned from universities, and they really weren't allowed. It was just, we think we live in the patriarchy right now. No, sorry. They
Mhm.
were living there. And so they kind of used fairy tales as a way for them to kind of rewrite their own history
Mhm.
and describe what they wanted to do and make commentary on the social structure of their day and age. Someone said that the glittering gowns were camouflage. These were Trojan horses of descent. And
Mhm.
that's kind of epic. Like that's epic. I'm obsessed with that. Like I love that women are just kind of coming out here and saying, "You love this fun little story." Psych, I'm shitting on you. Like
It's
it's so
I
good.
mean, it's so classic too because I feel like since the dawn of time, women have always really been seen as like the storytellers within
Hmm.
the community, passing down oral histories from generation to generation. Um, and obviously for a lot of that time have faced a lot of oppression and the need to uplift these other women with stories and figuring out how to solve their own problems, right?
Hmm.
You know, it's just really interesting how we think fairy tales kind of started in 17th century France, but like they really were rooted in old folklore tales,
Yeah,
which have been passed down, right? Just sort of a new terminology was invented in the term fairy tale, which
totally.
basically is all of these fairy tales that these women were talking about were collected into a book called Les Cabinets des Fées, the OG feminist fairy tale collection. Okay, it stands for, or not stands for, it translates to the fairy cabinet, and it brings together collections of tales from the 17th and 18th century with the aim of preserving them from oblivion. The author or the curator of all of these stories, Mayer, created a compendium bringing together tales with or without fairy tale elements on all from origins unlike the Grimm, who came later with nationalist motives. Fairy tales do exist. Let's be clear, the way that we're talking about this right now is very much from like a Western
Yeah,
kind of lens, a
totally.
Western white person type of lens. However, fairy tales and folklore have existed throughout the entirety of human history.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to note that while the Western canon dominates, non Western tales often predate or evolve independently as well.
Hmm.
They may not be feminist in the terms of like Western sense,
Yeah.
but many feature clever, powerful women and resistance in spiritual, communal, or subtle ways. Women have always been part of the storytelling and the revolution. So,
Yeah.
just to note that, like, yes, this is, we're talking about like 17th century France, and I don't want to hear, yeah, blah, 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 but all about that. Yes, we don't have time to get into all of that today. We're talking about kind of the name the fairy tales and where
Yeah.
this comes from.
Yeah, so they started in these Parisian salons, and a salon is basically a gathering hosted by aristocratic women who to discuss issues of the day. It's just ladies getting together to kind of bitch. They
Ladies
are chatting,
lunch.
they are talking, they are venting mood. And I have to read something that I got from Wikipedia because I actually need to be I'm hosting a salon at my house soon, and it says before the end of the 17th century, those gatherings were frequently held in the bedroom. A lady, reclining on her bed, would receive close friends who would sit on chairs or stools drawn around. Mood. This woman is just absolutely chilling in bed, and she's saying, "Ladies, come in and gather around my bed." And they just started telling stories. So while they had these salons, these gatherings, in the bedroom while someone is just chilling in bed. They were talking about arts and letters, politics, marriage, love. They were talking about their want for financial and physical independence and access to education. So they're just talking about all these things that they're not having access to and what they want. And so this is kind of like the feminist revolution. Like they're trying to get their rights, and
The good fight never ends, you
yeah,
guys,
they
at
were,
the end of the
and they
day.
really wanted to argue for, because at this time there was a lot of arranged marriages, and
Mhm.
I think that's something that was really prevalent and kind of hard for us to really wrap our heads around, for the most part. But they really wanted to argue for love and intellectual compatibility instead of arranged marriage, which I think is really telling because we do see those themes a lot in fairy tales. And like,
Mhm.
I don't want to, Cinderella, the prince doesn't want to just get married to another princess for the kingdom. He wants to get married for love. Find Cinderella. You get it. But in the mid 17th century, they did begin parlor games. Parlor
Mhm.
games became really popular at these salons, and they were all based in folktales. So, like Nicole was saying, folktales and folklore have existed forever, and this was just something where they almost like gamified that. And
Mhm.
so they were basically kind of like playing Mad Libs, or they were like playing this game where those games where you're like, okay, I'm going to start a story, and then popcorn to someone else, and they
Mhm.
have to add something else to the story. So saloniers, if you will, would be chosen. And this game was that they had to retell old folk tales in a new way, showcasing their verbal agility, so how quickly they could think on the spot, and include sly comments on aristocratic life. So this was really important. The decorative language that they used was really key because this is when they started doing social commentary, and you
Mhm.
had to really disguise this into rebellious subtext, to be able to slide past court censors. So
Mhm.
they were bringing this to, they were talking around people from the court, and even talking badly about the king, and like you didn't want to get your head chopped off, so you needed to have that really kind of like sly subtext, which I think is really fun and something that we see throughout history of people using the arts, to make commentary on their political and social environment,
Mhm.
which I think is just really fun, that these women were just like kind of playing games and being like, all right, you tell this folk tale, but make it about today.
Make it
It's so
messy.
fun. It's like when they made the modern day Romeo and Juliet with
Mhm.
Leonardo DiCaprio, and it was so bad.
Exactly. That's exactly like that.
It's exactly like that. So there's stories that they started coming up with that kind of ended up becoming that book, that Nicole was talking about. The stories often featured young, clever girls who were being controlled by the patriarchy, so fathers, kings, or elderly wicked fairies. And they also featured groups of wise fairies, which were always characterized as intelligent women, who stepped in to put everything right. So it's really kind of just fun to think about how they were just putting their own reality into this like fantasy setting, which I mean, everyone does that. You even think about, like, I don't know, it's like like bedtime stories when you're growing up. You'd be like, "Oh, Dad, tell me a bedtime story," and he'd be like, "Well, once there was a princess, and
Mhm.
she was beautiful, and she had brown hair and brown eyes, and she had a little brother, and like," and they're just telling you about your life, but in through the lens of like you being a princess or you being like
Mhm.
whatever you are. And I think that we do that all the time. You see that everywhere, so it's fun.
It's
I don't know. It's
human
just like
nature.
It's just very like comforting
Doesn't it
to
make
know
you
that
feel like
there are things
so,
that
yeah,
just won't
like
change, you know?
connected
Yeah.
to these women hundreds of years ago, that
Yeah.
this experience, what, the surroundings are a little bit different, but we're all kind of connected through the same problems, which is nice, but it's also like, are we joking? Like
We're still doing
we're
this.
still doing this? Enough.
Ugh, yeah. It's like it's comforting, but it's also not.
Yeah.
But also like we're all the same. Girls are girls.
Girlhood girlhood
Girlhood lasts,
transcends
yes, all time
generations.
and space. So I think this was a really good quote. I think it's from Jack Zipes, so this is where I start. I'm trying to credit people, but I don't know if I'm doing it right. But this quote really was fun for me and just really kind of sums up this whole time period of fairy tales. So in the 17th century France, women were locked out of schools and universities, turned to fairy tales as coded tools of rebellion. They wrote godlike fairies into their stories as avatars of female power, proto-feminist icons resisting patriarchal rules. I'm
Slay.
obsessed with that.
Slay, slay,
I'm
slay.
obsessed with it. It's so fun and so cool. And like, this whole conversation is really getting me freaking hyped because you know that we love a fairy book. And it's so fun knowing the history of it and knowing that this
Mhm.
has been around forever and it's not like just now and, some silly thing that people can look down on. Like, people have been doing this forever.
Exactly. Well, people have always been looking down on things that women love, and that's the whole reason we have
Amen.
this podcast. So,
Amen. Amen.
just
Amen.
another thing to add to the list.
Yeah. And
Uh,
like we were talking about earlier, so, these fairy tales kind of had the ones that we're thinking of kind of had this start in 17th century France and in these salons. But then you get to Disney
mhm.
and kind of the modern day fairy tale and
Yeah.
what we think of now when we think of the word fairy tale. For a long time, you would think of the Brothers Grimm, and then now it's just Disney.
Which, to be clear, the fairy tale cabinet or whatever it was called predates
Yeah.
Brothers Grimm.
Yep.
So that is before, which I found really interesting because I didn't know that.
Yeah. Also, side note, the Brothers Grimm is such a sick name. Like, they're not calling themselves the Grimm brothers. Like, they're the Brothers Grimm. Like,
Yeah.
they really kind of popped off when they were naming themselves. That one slaps. Like, good for them. Like, those sound like dark fairy tale writers.
Yeah.
They did good on that
Absolutely.
one. Jack Zipes says fuck Disney, basically.
At the end of the day.
He's put it bluntly, he said Disney and the entertainment industry suck the radical potential out of fairy tales. They turn rebellion into merch, feminism into branding, and it's not empowerment, it's pacification.
He says Disney didn't just clean up fairy tales, they defanged them.
I mean, like, yeah.
True.
Like, it's so crazy, like, looking at what we think of as fairy tales now and then like knowing where they started is like the Little Mermaid, she's dead. She turned into sea foam.
Yeah.
Like, her body disintegrated. And she didn't like get her voice
She
back.
didn't find her Prince Charming.
She wasn't combing her hair with a fork.
No, she wasn't. She didn't have a little crab friend.
This bitch basically like had Ebola. Her body like ate itself from the inside out and she turned it to sea foam. Disney could never. Disney could never show that. They would never.
I think it's so funny too, thinking about your fairy tale ending, right? Your fairy tale ending, your happy ending.
I would never want a fairy tale ending in the way fairy tales kind of started.
Truly. And I think it's also interesting too in the way that a lot of these fairy tales in their kind of older forms are really about women saving themselves and like not necessarily needing a man. And actually, you do want a fairy tale ending when you think about it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh no, like you want a happy ending because you're coming out smarter and stronger and learning a lot about yourself in the end. And so, you know, Disney really made it this, oh, your Prince Charming, your fairy tale wedding, the white dress, the ball gown, the happily ever after.
Right.
But like, that's really not what this
They
is about at
really
all.
fed so hard into the participation trophy
Mm-hmm.
era of life.
Yeah.
I don't know, like there was all of the drama around Snow White, and
Mm-hmm.
remember Rachel Zegler came under like huge like everyone was hating on her because she was like, this isn't going to be like the Snow White that you think of. Like, it's a lot about like, you know, she doesn't need a prince to save
Mm-hmm.
her. She doesn't
Mm-hmm.
need this. And people were pissed off. They were like, stop putting your feminist agenda on Snow White. Like, just give us the fairy tale we all love. But like, that's bringing it back to like what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're learning that fairy tales were the feminist agenda.
Yeah.
And so it's just really interesting to kind of see the like roller coaster that these things go on, and like that movie trying to go back to really its roots, and people being
Mm-hmm.
like, don't change it
Yeah.
because that's not what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
No, actually what
Exactly.
you're thinking of isn't what it wasn't supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. You want the capitalist version.
Mm-hmm.
You want the
Oh,
capitalist,
amen.
idealized
Amen.
version, cookie cutter, clean, what you want to project on women version. Okay. And that's
For
not what
real.
this is. Anyway, speaking of cookie cutter women, one of Jack Zive's favorite leading ladies is Baba Yaga.
Baba
Okay.
Yaga.
We love Baba Yaga. You know her, you love her. She's kind of always around in fairy tales. She is the crone. She is the gatekeeper, a goddess, three-faced goddess, anyone? The mother, the maiden, and the crone.
Baba Yellow
Um
Legs, anyone?
Baba Yellow Legs. But you know, he basically says that she is raw feminine power. She's not evil. She's a tester and a gatekeeper, and not a gatekeeper in like a negative kind of way, in a gatekeeper in like a testing your abilities kind of
Mm-hmm.
way. She breaks the mold of the traditional fairy tale witch because she's just isn't just evil. She's
Yeah.
complex, powerful, and often respected, right? She's not your typical villain. She's not trying to teach kids to behave. She's trying to see if you're brave enough to earn her help, right? He says that she's just extremely powerful on her own terms. And
Yeah.
she's a spinster in all senses of the word, right? She's an old lady who lives alone. She's not married. She's a witch. She lives out in the bog. She's a bog witch. Which fun fact I learned about the word spinster related is that it is now kind of obviously used as a slur, quote unquote, for an old unmarried woman. But back in the day, spinsters were the women who spun wool and they had a job and they didn't need to get married. And
Yeah.
so they usually never got
I
married.
actually chose that life.
They were able to financially support themselves. They didn't have to marry. They didn't need a man to support them. And then men went ahead and started reframing spinsters as a bad thing. So ladies, make sure you know that at the end of the day, you don't need a man. You can be a spinster. It's going to be okay.
Totally.
Anyway, Baba Yaga is a spinster. She is not a side character. Okay. She's usually one of the main characters in the story. She's a symbol of independence, chaos, and natural wisdom. She often helps
I would
girls.
say we are kind of like that too.
I would say so too. We're the Baba Yaga
Of our
of
generation.
podcasting, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. She often helps girls grow up, think for themselves, or escape danger if they can handle her tests. So, you know, I think that it's really just interesting that this major player who's often made out to be seen as evil, if you actually think about and you have some media literacy and you're able to comprehend what you're reading, actually she's doing a lot of good for these
Yeah.
stories.
I agree with
So, you know, I think we can kind of circle back to the whole Disney of it all. Like, they were just like, hey, how can we get little girls and little boys to buy into the fantasy of this fairy tale, of this happy ever after? And let's whitewash these stories and make
Yeah.
them palatable to younger audiences. And sure, in the stories that we know and love, there are motifs and there are lessons to be learned in all of those Disney movies, right?
Mhm.
And I would say now, people love to argue on the internet about, oh, I don't let my children watch the like 1950s, 1960s Disney movies, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, because those are about women being subservient. And, I just don't love that. And I'm like, okay, that's fair, but you can also have a conversation with your child about
Mm-hmm.
what's happening and maybe teach them a different lesson if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing these, female characters who are coming into their own, like Moana's going on the epic hero's journey, right? Like we see these lessons and they're growing into themselves. So it's, while they're not as graphic, I feel like we're kind of turning the page again, that
Right.
the stories that are being told are a little bit not as clean cut and a little bit more heroic, which
Yeah.
I find to be inspiring. So Disney said the tides are changing
Yeah.
and we have to follow the money. So we're going to start telling stories that are a little messy again.
Yeah. We need that. And I think that like it is, I mean, talking about the evolution of stories, stories do evolve. They are basically kind of cultural memes. And I think that's
100%.
like it's memes change based on where we are in the culture and what's going on, like what is happening in the zeitgeist.
Each
And
iteration of that meme
yes,
evolves and changes.
yeah. And fairy tales do that too. So the stories in these fairy tales evolve because they teach survival. Like Little Red Riding Hood is on gender violence, and we have this sense of magic being knowledge. And I think that's kind of omnipresent in all of these stories where it's coded, it's transformative, and it's oftentimes very community oriented. So one really good quote about this is the real superpower in fairy tales is solidarity. I think Zyke said this. He said, fairy tales are mimetic. Like genres, they evolve because they carry essential survival knowledge. Stories like Little Red Riding Hood persist because they teach, warn, and reflect real fears like gendered violence in symbolic form. And I think that's always how stories evolve. And we're always telling stories in order to teach lessons. People are always coming up with stories to illustrate thoughts in words. And I know, like, there's the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always illustrating lessons, because it's one thing to say, like, don't trust like just any old woman that you see on the street because she could be dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
versus telling it in the story of Little Red Riding Hood where you could meet a little old woman and she's actually a wolf and she's going to eat you.
Mm-hmm.
What big teeth you have, all the better to eat you with, my dear. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they tell these stories in order to teach lessons. And I think
Yeah.
that that's why they always are able to evolve, because you can always repurpose them for a
100%.
different lesson to be told.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting for like a little bit of context around the original Red Riding Hood that
Yeah,
it
tell
was
me.
like incredibly grotesque. Okay. So the early versions, there was cannibalism, there was poop jokes, there was nudity. Little Red Riding Hood basically eats her grandmother. She tricks the wolf and then she escapes. So she essentially saves herself, right? And in the 17th century, Charles Perrault, who basically rewrote the modern day Little Red Riding Hood, he kind of sanitized the tale a little bit,
Just a little.
and turned it into a warning about seductive men. Okay. So real wolves, which in the medieval times in European folklore, like wolves are a big, um, you know, fear of the people, right? So he changed it from a real wolf to a metaphor for sexual predators, and the story shifted from survival to submission. So basically, like, don't get into bed with these men who are whispering sweet nothings into your ear because they will consume you literally and figuratively. And
Mhm.
so I just find that incredibly interesting because not once would I ever stop to consider that Little Red Riding Hood might be about not letting men control your brain.
I mean, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I have a whole new outlook on life.
Kind of insane. And I think, like, I don't know. It's so fun and so interesting. And I think there's like one of Zype's favorite tales is called How Six Made Their Way in the World.
Mhm.
And it's about solidarity and how cooperation amongst oddballs can topple corrupt kings. And it's it's essentially a fairy tale Avengers story, origin story, but anti-capitalist.
Mhm.
And I think that's a story that we've heard over and
Over
over
and
and
over
over
and
and
over.
over again. You know, it's the island of misfit toys in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's like in Harry Potter, Harry, Hermione, and Ron are kind of outcasts in their own right, and they come together. Like all of these stories, it's about the power of community and surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are
Mhm.
all a little bit different but can bring something to the table, which I think is just another great lesson. Like there's just so many different lessons that you can find in stories and so many different ways to tell that one story, which I think is just so fun and so cool.
100%. And I think, keep in mind that story also originally written by a woman,
Hmm.
right? And he loves the story because it's weird, funny, and deeply political under the surface. It proves that fairy tales aren't just about magic, they're about imagining new ways of living and challenging power through unity. And so, again, like you said, collective action. Working together for a collective goal and with people who might not on the surface seem like they're good for you, a good fit for your team. But really, when you work together, magic does happen, just not in a sort of literal
Hmm.
kind of spell type of way.
One of my favorite examples of this, Monsters University. Mike and Sully, they get what is their I forget what fraternity they get put into, but it's basically quote unquote the loser fraternity. And it's just a bunch of misfit guys, oddballs. Mike doesn't think anyone has any skills to bring to the table because they're all losers, but guess what? They work together and they all have something special to bring to the table. And then when they work together and they come together as a team, they win. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Monsters University.
I mean, it's giving Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Which I
It's
mean,
also, have you seen Sydney White, the
have I
Amanda
seen Sydney
Bynes
White?
remake of Snow White? Like those misfits, they make magic happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you seen the House Bunny?
Of course. Here we go. We're just listing modern day fairy
We're
tales.
we're gonna listen to some modern retellings. But okay, we've talked a lot about fairy tales in
Hmm.
the way of these folklore and everything. But you know what we haven't really talked about yet? The peak of what we want to talk about today: fairy smut and the rise of shadow daddies.
Hmm.
We have to talk about it because I mean, we have to talk. You can't talk about this without talking about ACOTAR and Sarah J. Maas and kind of the explosion of romantasy that is just kind of everywhere right now.
Yeah.
And where these authors are getting a lot of their inspiration. But it's really important to remember and think about that when these types of stories started, like medieval fairies were not chill. They
Mm-mm.
were not hot men with abs. Like these dudes
Not even
were
medieval, like all fae. Like you
fae
can fuck with
were
the fae. Also,
terrifying.
there are still cultures out there who do not fuck with the fae.
No, like they were scary. They were chaotic and dark, but a little bit seductive, but like kind of not in a hot way. I don't know. Very scary.
They were
And
seducing women and kidnapping them, essentially,
yes,
at the end
like
of the day.
so let's get into some history of fairy smut. So
Mhm.
obviously recently ACOTAR, Quicksilver, all these books that feature fae in them have kind of popped off recently.
Mhm.
But they have been a part of literature for centuries. And we see a lot of the books and authors that we love right now taking inspiration from those. So, for instance, Sarah J. Maas was inspired almost completely by the ballad of, get this, Tamlin. Two words, first name Tam, last name Lin. Tamlin. What does that sound like? Obviously the inspo for Tamlin and maybe the inspiration for the whole story. So the Ballad of Tamlin is a 16th century Scottish ballad about a fairy world. And let me let me give you the plot.
Yeah,
See if
break it down for me.
anything rings a bell to you. All right. I do have before I give the plot, I do have to say I was speechless when I found out that the female main character of a 16th century Scottish ballad's name was Janet.
I know.
I don't know what I was expecting her name to be, but it surely was not Janet. That's for sure. So, according to National Geographic, Tamlin tells the tale of Janet, a young woman impregnated by Tamlin, a man who's being held captive by a powerful and dangerous fairy queen who can wield magic as easily as breathing. Determined to rescue her true love, Janet braves the full enchanted might of the otherworld, and through sheer force of will, she succeeds in saving him from a dire fate. Where have I read that before? So, Sarah, obviously a little bit inspired by the Ballad of Tamlin. I think that is.
Do you think one day, hundreds of years from now, they'll read ACOTAR and be like, this is an old fairy tale and it's an old version?
And someone is going to rewrite it and like everyone's be like, she was really inspired by A Court of Thorns and Roses. Like, maybe they'll be like, oh, and it's written in such old world. Like, they like have toilets that aren't all bidets. Like, they're going to be like, they're absolutely living in filth. But the history of fairies in the way that we think of them in terms of fae, because there's different types of fairies, I think is important too, because there's fairies that we think of more like sprites, but then there's fairies like fae, F-A-E,
there's the folk.
There's just like a lot of different types, but they were really popular in Ireland and Scotland, Cornwall and Wales. And they've been kind of fairy worlds, and writings of them have been found going back to the Middle Ages. And other cultures have similar supernatural beings, not necessarily called fae, but really are similar. So nymphs in Greek mythology and jinnies in Arabic mythology are kind of described similarly to fae without just the same words.
Ultimately tricksters.
So in the Middle Ages, though, fairies were not characters in these books. They were real. People believed in fairies the way they believed in God. Like, fairies were really, really real to them, and because they used them to explain the unexplainable. So, why did a seemingly healthy baby die? You can't necessarily explain that. So it must have been fairies. They must have killed them, or like the parents must have done something wrong. They angered the fairies. Why did a herd of cattle all fall ill? Fairies. Why were some people more skilled at music? They had the favor of the fairies. So fairies were really kind of the reasons that people attributed to things that they couldn't reason, which again is something that people have done for all time.
I want you to know that I have started adopting fairy coded language in my life.
Okay. Tell me
and
more.
That when I misplace things, I go, the little folk are messing with me. They'll return it to me at some point. And I always do find that thing that I'm looking for. I'm like, the little folk, they're messing with me, but I know that they'll return it to me. And I just have to wait until they're ready.
I mean, yeah, so they were usually causing chaos. That's like, when you said little tricksters, absolutely. They were at best mischievous, and at worst straight up evil. That's kind of what people were like. Fairies can be kind of fun and silly, or they can be horrifically evil.
But depends on the kind, depends on the context in which you're conversing with them.
Come on, fairies contain multitudes, okay? They're
exactly, just like women. Please. Just like women.
According to folklorist Dr. Francis Young, it's important to bear in mind that before the 19th century, fairies gave rise to fear. In many cases, it was taboo to even refer to them by name, giving rise to phrases such as the gentry or the fair folk, because people were so terrified of fairies that they would not even say it. They who must not be named were fairies back then.
So Voldemort.
Yeah, truly. He who shall not be named, Nicole, please, it's taboo. In 1960, we had an absolute icon by the name of Anne McCaffrey. An icon. She began writing her novel Dragon Riders of Pern. And the plot for
We
this
should
book,
read it.
I'm about to. No, like for real, we should. The plot of this book was about it was about dragons whose ecstatic mating rituals spark similar feelings between their riders. Name that book. Name that book.
I bet you it's better than Fourth Wing. I would bet so much money that it's better than
Anne?
Fourth Wing.
I mean, well, Anne was the OG. Anne thought of
Yeah.
it first, so it must be better.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, I don't know if it was the first recorded, but like that was one of the earliest versions of romantasy and like taking these like
Eroticism.
fairies and fae stories and really putting the romance into it. And now we're seeing a lot of,
And obviously, like, there's always been hints of romance, and
Yeah.
like, and they may not have been like romance, and it could be, you know, they're horrifying, right? You're being kidnapped by a fae prince and being forced to fall in love. Like, it may not be willing, but again,
could
it's
be 365.
reflecting.
Yeah.
It's reflecting the times and the energy of the people
Yeah.
who are telling those stories, right? So, in the '60s, maybe women are maybe starting to marry for love now,
Yeah.
and they're interested in dragons who fuck.
Exactly. Who amongst us? All right. And so now we're seeing a rise of the phrase fairy porn. Everyone has said it. If you have a man in your life at all, he has said this to you. He said, "What fairy porn are you reading now?" That is all Nick describes. Anyone we see anyone in his life, and they're like, "Okay, what are you reading?" He's like, "Oh, fairy porn." Stop saying that. But
It's not derogatory.
no,
Stop using it
we're
in
taking
a
it back.
derogatory way.
So fairy porn is something is a phrase used to describe everything from Ella Field's dark fae fantasy Nectar of the Wicked to the iconic Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet Barbarians. It can run the gamut. But this label of fairy porn, people are using it now. We are using it. We are taking it back. It is reclaiming terms like porn and smut that previously were used to denigrate fantasy romance. And that label of like fairy porn or fairy smut only refers to how explicit the sex scenes in the work are, not necessarily the quality of the themes, the plot, the prose. So it's really kind of, people are using it as just this umbrella term to describe the whole book, when like that's not necessarily accurate at all. But it is kind of taking back this language that is used to really like make fun of people or
Make fun of women.
Yeah, just degrade people that care about things. And I think
it's giving
Kate Roberts, Neon Gods.
Katie Roberts, yeah.
Katie Roberts. So she said something really, really good that I loved. I loved Katie Roberts' quote.
She's also written monster fantasy. So
I mean, she's not judging.
She's not
say
judging.
one thing about Katie Roberts. She is not.
I think she wrote one about like a dragon, like a humanoid dragon. Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, good for her. But she said about the term fairy porn and fairy smut, it's one of those things that I think when used inside the community who reads fantasy romance is sort of an inside joke. The inside joke also serves as a middle finger to the male-dominated establishment who would seek to shame those who indulge in fantasy romance. And I love that. It reminds me of the book by Amanda Montell. You know, she's one of my favorite authors. And she wrote the book Word Slut, a feminist guide to taking back the English language. And in that book, she talks all about linguistics and how different words like bitch and slut never had a meaning to them until people started using them and attaching a negative connotation to use them to describe women. And I think that, you know, and her whole thing is about like taking back those words. And I think that, you know, people calling it fairy porn, but then now the collective group kind of reclaiming that and saying, yeah, what about it, is so powerful and is just something that is so fun to see. And we've seen that in like the F1 space too. You know, like being a fangirl was not respected at all and was really like, that term was used to put us down. But it was then when we had this whole community of women start using that and saying like, yeah, that is who we are proud about it, then that's when things stop having weight.
So you stop giving it power.
Yeah, Exactly.
essentially. And I just find it so interesting too that like once again, women are made to feel less than for the things that they're
Always.
enjoying, but this we're all part of a group that a lot of men are not, right? And
Mhm.
they're missing out on these stories and these lessons and these vital conversations because they're choosing to look down on the things that we're enjoying.
Mhm.
It's equivalent to those 17th century women in their saloneries or whatever they were called, who
Can
were,
we call them salon orgies?
I said
Oh,
saloneries.
salons. I was like,
Um,
I mean, also probably.
Probably at the end of the day, they were talking about fairy porn. Of course, they were salon orgies. No, but again, those women were having conversations and passing down information and sharing stories that other men were not privy to. And it's
Yeah.
just like, it just continues on in just same story, different font.
Yeah.
So ultimately, from changelings to Tamlin and ACOTAR, fairy stories have always been about control, fear, and desire. And I think that that's just so important because it's like it's really exploring these desires and these fantasies that are basically seen as taboo, right?
Mhm.
It's taboo when you tell someone I'm reading fairy porn because I love to conceptually think about a 500-year-old man with wings treating me right. Isn't that crazy? Wow. I can't get a man in today's day and age to give me a text back, but guess what? In my fantasy world, I can get a man who has 500 years of expertise and can fly to say hello to me. Isn't that crazy? It's fan. And I it's so funny that you talk about that quote with Ice Planet Barbarians is that I'm like that is an ultimate fantasy novel, okay?
Yes.
The premise of Ice Planet Barbarians is these women get kidnapped by aliens, okay? In the first book, they get kidnapped by aliens, bad aliens, okay? And they're doing bad
Bad
things to
aliens.
these women on the plane. The ship crashes on another alien planet, not the same aliens that have kidnapped them, okay? And it's this plane of ship of only women, okay? And they crash land and the colony of aliens who live on this planet, all of the women, all of the female aliens have died, okay? So now congratulations, they've got the jackpot. They now have all of these females that they can build lives with. And when I tell you it is like so fantasy because these male characters treat them emotionally well. They treat them, they're so respectful. They financially take care of them. They sexually take care of them. It's literally anything that you could want in life, okay? And all they have to do is wear furs instead of pants, okay? And yeah, it is a bit of a fantasy because you're never going to find anyone who's going to do that for you. God forbid. God forbid I want to read a little story about being taken care of every now and again.
God for honestly, the fantasy, the real fantasy that gets me every time is God forbid I want to go somewhere where I can get lasered in the eye and understand any language in the world, in the
100%.
universe.
100%. God forbid. God
Sorry,
forbid
I was
a
not very
woman
good
have
in foreign language classes, so God
passions.
forbid I wish I could get one lasered into my brain. That's my fantasy. That is my fantasy. But another thing that these books that we all are reading, a lot of them have in common is the shadow daddy.
Mhm.
The shadow daddy of it all.
Mhm.
Very much popularized by Sarah J. Maas. She kind of started this trope, but the modern shadow daddy,
He's
as it is
morally
known
gray.
colloquially, is hot, but rooted in myths, as always. So we
Mhm.
see people like Hades, Lucifer, Odin. They're all gods of death and shadow and irresistible danger. And it's just kind of like a theme, like a type, an archetype of a character that sells and works. And
Mhm.
everyone is going to be interested in this, like always, because
We
people
love a
are,
morally gray character
yes.
who is complex and has a lot of trauma and is able to go from a bad situation and come out on the other side being
Yeah.
emotionally vulnerable. God
Like
forbid.
powerful, sexy characters are like linked to darkness, have been around forever, and they
Mhm.
will always be around. That's
Yes.
just kind of like a fact, I think.
Mhm.
And haters will say it's Photoshop. Haters are going to say it's Photoshop. Haters are going to say that all romantasy authors are copying each other and
Mhm.
doing the same things. But what have we learned today? They ain't the first to do it, and they ain't going to be the last to do it.
Mm-mm. Everything is a copy of everything else.
Everything is a copy of
That
everything.
is human history. Okay,
Like,
we are always the stories that have been passed down for generations. They're just slightly different, and you know what? I eat it up every
exactly. Like
time.
people like Sarah J. Maas did it first. Actually, the Ballad of Tamlin
Did
did
it
it
first,
first.
and I'm sure
And
there's something
before
before that as
that,
well.
the Ballad of Tamlin didn't even do it first. It's nothing is original. There is no such thing as being totally original and unique. It makes me think of when Ed Sheeran was getting sued, remember?
No.
From Oh, okay, well he was getting sued because some artist said that Ed copied like a riff,
Mm.
like a guitar riff in one of his songs. And Ed had to go in and be like, there's a limited
Oh,
number
actually, I
of
do
notes.
remember this. Yeah,
There is no such thing as an original song
guitar riff.
anymore because there is a finite number of notes, there is a finite number of chords and the way that they can be played and what orders they can be played in. So
Mhm.
any chord that like riff that I play has been done before somewhere.
Yeah,
And so it can't be like about that one snippet. It's the song is it's as a whole. That's what's
100%.
unique. And I think that's what's unique about these stories. Like there can be tropes, there can be themes, there can be characters that are similar to others and maybe inspired by, but it's what they do with that and what they can make it their own
Mhm.
that makes them unique. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, guys, it fucking sells. So people have been talking about shadow daddy burnout and people are getting bored with like these same tropes. It's not going to go anywhere, guys, because you're still going to buy it and you're still going to read it.
You're
Comic
still gonna
Storm was like the highest selling book, like fastest selling book in fucking years. I don't know. Like,
and I still read it.
and
Did I enjoy it that much? No, I did
guess
not.
what? I'll read
We
the
both
next one
agreed about
too.
that.
I'll read the next one too. Maybe not gladly, but I will read it
100.
because why not? You
Why would
know?
I not? Again, everything is repackaged something else. You think about religion, right?
Mhm.
Religion, there are so many connections between modern Christianity and Greek mythology, actually.
Mhm. Yep.
And there's a lot of connection between Greek mythology and paganism.
Mhm.
And it's all the same story. It's just repackaged a little differently. No matter what you believe in, it's
Exactly.
all there because we as humans have been telling ourselves the same stories for as long as we've been able to communicate with one another.
Yep. Exactly. It's really fun to look at the history of things that you love. And
Mhm.
I loved learning about the history of romantasy and fairy smut because I feel so connected to my ancestors.
I know.
Like,
What would you say is your favorite childhood fairy tale, and do you think that it still stands today, or like what would you say you would change about it?
hmm. My favorite was I was a big Cinderella girl. I
Mhm.
loved Cinderella. But I think of the Cinderella genre like she did a lot of that for herself. Yeah, she had a fairy godmother, but like she was just a good person.
Mhm.
And I think the moral of the story there is like be that honestly, you
Be
know
true
what
to yourself.
Cinderella had? An
Mm,
abundance mindset.
she did.
She said, I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to treat these horrible people as horribly as they're treating me.
Mhm.
And I am lucky and good things will happen for me.
Yeah,
And they did. And
and
so
they did.
I kind of stand by Cinderella. I stand by Cinderella being my favorite fairy tale.
I love that.
What was yours? Yours
Mine
was Beauty and the Beast.
100% Beauty and the Beast. This is why I love Stockholm Syndrome books these days. No, I'm just kidding. But not
These
really.
days, all of the days, babe.
Also why Stockholm Syndrome is my favorite One Direction song.
She just gets
No,
it.
but it's also I don't think it aged very well because for me, this is why I get into issues because it's a real I can fix him story and you can't fix him.
You
You
can't.
can't fix a man,
You've
okay?
tried.
Don't do it. Don't waste your time. It's not going to work out for you. Your beast is not going to magically turn into a prince overnight. Go find a nice man who's already a Prince Charming. Okay. That's my takeaway. Did not age well. Uh, but I do think I relate to Belle in that I love to read. So there you
And
go.
I think that you relate to her in the way that you, as a person, do not fall in love with people based on how they look.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
But you
No, I
love
just think that,
ugly
like,
men.
no, I just think that you, as a person, like, you are always like, the first thing that you ever tell me about anyone that you're dating is like how much they make you laugh or how kind they are or the way they treated you. And I think that you have a very like Belle heart where you're like, I'm like, you are actually a person that I think would be really good on like a Love is Blind because you fall in love with the person for who they are and not just like focused on what they look like. And I think that that is very special.
Thank you for positively reframing that you think all
I
of my
didn't
boyfriends are
mean it that
ugly.
way. You know how I meant it. You know how I meant it.
Guys,
Girl, I was
guys, drop a
spiraling over
comment
your
if you
most
think Kate.
recent crush too, okay?
That's true. That's true. All
Oh,
right. Well, on that note, guys, the moral of the story. Let's recap a couple of things we've
yeah.
learned. Okay, fairy tales are subversive, and so is fairy smut.
Yep.
Okay. Zipes defines magic as transformational, scientific, emotional, and social. Don't forget, there's magic here on our planet. You just have a little whimsy enough to see it. And fairy tales are manuals for reinvention disguised as fantasy. So the next time you read a little fairy tale, a little fantasy book, think about what the moral of that story is and how you can incorporate that into your life and how you would retell that story to shape future generations. And we would just love to know in the comments of the YouTube video or the reel, whatever you want to do, what your favorite fairy tale is and kind of what the moral of the story is there, because I think there's a lot to be learned.
And also would love to know your favorite romantasy book or series.
Mhm.
Which
And
one are you loving?
who's your favorite fantasy book boyfriend?
We have a lot of questions.
Who would you say is your favorite fantasy book boyfriend?
You know I have a thing for Asriel.
I know you do.
And Rune.
I know.
Ruined it
It's
on Crown
really
Prince of
it's
the Valbarans
really
Day.
hard.
It's so hard. And I love Lorcan too. I love the mysterious ones that are all really kind of angry.
Hades from A Touch of Darkness,
Yeah.
one of my top tier book boyfriends.
Yeah.
Followed closely by Cassian.
Mm-hmm.
And in third place, I do have to give it to Kingfisher from Quicksilver.
Yeah. Good one.
Mhm.
Good one.
You know, I love that brooding kind of himbo hot boy, you know?
Yeah. You do. You
Mhm.
really do. I mean, yeah, Cassian, perfect example.
Yeah. All right, friends, this has been an incredible episode. I hope you learned a lot. We did. I feel like you can now go confidently
In the
into your
direction
bright
of your dream.
future. Yeah, and say, yeah, I'm into fairy porn. I'm into fairy smut. What about it? Here's why it's important
Loud and
and why
proud,
you'll never
baby.
understand it. We are part of an exclusive club that you'll never get into, and that's not my problem.
And we just know that you are among friends. And what did we learn? That community is a big part of these fairy tales. And you are a part of a community that spans hundreds of thousands of generations.
There's not that many
I don't
generations
know.
of people on this planet, but
Not on the planet. Not like now.
okay, well, generations or lineage. Anyway,
Whatever, lots and lots and lots of generations. This club
that's
is
not the
huge.
point.
This club
Kate
is
and I,
massive, and you're a part of it, and you should take comfort in that.
One thing
You are
that's
never
going to have
alone.
to happen in a See You on the Internet podcast, Kate and I are going to have to fight about something. And that's that.
Just
So
us
with
two.
that checkbox being marked off, I hope you have a good week. We will see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.
Bye. Thanks for listening to See You on the Internet.
To keep up with the fun between episodes, make sure to follow us at See You on the Internet Pod on both Instagram and TikTok.
And to join in on the fun on the podcast itself, call the Kate and Nicole hotline at 646-780-9063 or email us at hi@seeyouontheinternetpod.com.
We'll be back with a new episode soon, but in the meantime, we'll see you on the internet.